Mayor, thank you for your time, first of all.
My pleasure.
We're going to start off talking today about the budget. As you know, Seattle faces a projected $250 million budget shortfall over the next 2 years. So that, of course, means either big cuts and or more taxes. Can you clarify for us what you're going to take aim at first?
Well, what we're doing first, we always look at efficiencies first. So we look at where there's overlap in government, where we can drive efficiencies, where we could use technology to be better at what we do. And then we'll always look at revenues. I proposed this year a very progressive or a B&O tax, which allowed 90% of the business to actually have a tax break. And we announced many rollouts today for small businesses. So we'll use a combination of new revenues and efficiencies in government. And quite candidly, this is my 15th budget I've had to do, and you have to be pretty intense and deliberate, and you have to know what you're doing to manage a budget that exceeds $8 billion.
Efficiencies won't get you $250 million back, though. Where are you looking at cuts beyond that?
Well, again, worst case scenarios, sometimes you have to look at it. So I've asked my departments, 41 of which have looked at 8 to 10% cuts. The $250 million that we've already balanced the budget. I presented a balanced budget every year. And remember, I've had over $642 million of deficits since I've been in office. Every year it's been a tough hand for my administration. And I'm still able to get the work done that we've done, including recruiting police officers. So what we'll do again is we proposed a B&O tax policy, that's smart tax policy. We will again look at, for example, many of our departments do have overlapping functions. So we have white papers on how we're doing that. So we presented a balanced budget. We'll present a balanced budget next year, and it's just tough work, and that's what we do. I put a hiring freeze on, I put a travel ban on, only essential kinds of training is necessary. So we look at everything we could do to save money, and then we go after good revenue if we can.
There are some businesses, or there are some concerns by business entities that B&O tax could contribute to larger companies looking outside of the city. How do you balance that?
Sure. You take the high-tech sector, for example. That's about 40% of our jobs around here. And I recently read there were 46,000 layoffs in this region. So a smart mayor will always look at the business impacts. The fact is that when I develop tax policy, I talk to neighborhood activists, I talk to public safety advocates, I talk to big business, small business, and I come up with a package. And you won't see, again, this will be on the ballot, you won't see a lot of opposition because, again, Amazon, they made $60 billion in profit last year. The year before, they made $30 billion in profit. Microsoft made $80 billion in profit. I can go down the list of taxpayers. We are a wealthy city. And so when I ask the wealthy corporations to pay their share of taxes, I think they understand that. My job are to make sure they have a business environment by which they can thrive in. Good tax policy, strong public safety, employees that are coming here. So our tax policy reflects our approach on how we build a great city.
But the Downtown Seattle Association expressed concern. They were against the B&O because they do think that works against the revitalization of downtown.
Yeah. So Downtown Seattle Association, John Scholes, who's a big supporter of mine, we've had many conversations. And when you look at the tools that the city has, for example, my opponent will float out taxes that are unlawful. She talks about a vacancy tax. You can't do a vacancy tax. She'll talk about an inheritance or an estate tax. These taxes are not effective tools, nor are they even legal. So the B&O tax policy that we impose is one of the few tools we actually have. And again, I've had many conversations with my friend and supporter John Scholes as to why this is good tax policy. Again, I'm giving 90% of the taxpayers an actual break. We're looking at exempting businesses that we only had businesses that paid $100,000 were exempt. Now we took that up to $2 million. And we also took businesses that are exceeding $2 million, they get a $2 million credit. So this is good tax policy. And let me tell you, just full transparency here, I've been working on tax deals and housing deals for 30 years. I mean, I used to develop real estate investment trusts using tax credits. And so what we've done is we've implemented a very smart tax policy that taxes the big businesses, but I've convinced them, I believe, that they need to invest in the infrastructure. When you're extracting money out of a city, you have to put money back into the city, and that is the purpose of a B&O tax, just like a sales tax or a property tax or other means by which a city runs. In order to balance this budget, you have to know how the city runs, and that's one of the probably the biggest distinctions between my opponent and I, that she has zero budget experience. If you ask her about her budget experience, the only budget she's balanced is a $200,000 budget, $200,000 with zero employees. So for me, that's a scary proposition, given the complexity of these issues that Seattle face.
Part of the three-legged stool you mentioned before was crime and safety. Public safety is a big part of your platform. I'm sure you're aware of these numbers, Mayor. According to a recent FBI report, Seattle's violent crime rate has dropped recently, but it is still double the national average. On top of that, we are the third worst in the city of Seattle in the nation for property crime. We're talking car prowls, those petty crimes that is really aggravating to people when they talk about public opinion polls. It's a whopping 185% above the national average. So in a minute, can you sum up your plan to make Seattle a safer place for the people who not only live here, but the people who come here to do business?
Well, first, let me level set on some of the statistics which we've always validated. Homicides are down 41%. Serious crime, property crimes, shot fires are trending downwards. Let's just level set that. Number one. Number two is, when I became mayor, I had lost over 300 officers. And again, my opponent was the architect of the defund movement. And there was all of this talk about defunding the police department. She said, quote, imagine a Seattle without a police department, right? So I inherited a very tough hand. So how we fixed the problem, number one, is we're getting 10 applications a day. We're getting over 4,000 people applying to be police officers. This year alone, we're projected to have between 125 to 150 officers. These are unprecedented numbers. We've changed the recruiting system. We're recruiting from communities that we want to protect. I have a new chief of police that holds a PhD. He's a Marine. He's a criminologist type. We have PhDs in the police department. So we're doing everything right, number one. And we created the KIRO department from scratch. We're the largest city to have an unarmed response. We terminated the consent decree, so our use of force is a best standard, a national standard right now. So we're doing everything possible from an unarmed standpoint and a KIRO, in a police standpoint in terms of recruiting the right kind of officers to protect our streets.
As a follow-up, your opponent talks about an adequately funded SPD, an adequately funded public safety department, unarmed officers as well. What does that look like? Is it adequately funded right now, in your opinion, with the budget constraints that you're facing?
No, and in fact, yesterday we had a forum, and she will not answer a very simple question. How many officers do you think are adequate to protect the city? I've said 1,500. If you look at best practices, it should be about 1.9 for every 1,000 residents. It should be around 1,500. And I need 7-minute response times. I want cops to be able to get out, walk around the communities that they serve, get to know people. I want to do investigations. I want the closure rate to be extremely high. And we have a pretty good closure rate as we speak, but I need all hands on deck. And I want cops interfacing with our kids at school, making sure they feel safe, that kind of back and forth. She will not commit to a certain number because she knows she was the architect of the defund. Now she's walking that back, and so what I keep saying, I'm a known commodity. This is tough work. You don't just change your philosophical stance 2 or 3 years later. When I talk about strong, effective public safety, it's a unifying element in our city. I don't care what demographic you fit into, old, young, in the middle, everyone wants to feel safe. And so that kind of hypocrisy that you see in her current stat, all she will say is, I want adequate staffing. You have to have the targets that you need in order to run this city. And I'm afraid we will go backwards with that kind of vagueness and that kind of hypocrisy.
We are in a post-DOJ world. Judge Robards lifted that shroud where a lot of officers that I knew said that they were really constrained from doing their jobs. I still know officers on the force who everybody seems to love Chief Barnes. Mayor, that is one thing that seems to unify everybody, but one thing they're divided on is police accountability. And there are still a lot of people, including officers I know, who wonder if this particular environment is going to be good for ultimately for police accountability with SPD. How do you react to that?
So number one is I'm very proud of what our police department, what they are doing. They are setting a best practice on accountability. We have a three-legged stool, the Office of Police Accountability, the Director, the Community Police Commission, we have the Ombudsman in place. We have a pretty robust system. It needs to keep evolving. But what I'm most proud about is when we first started this, and I was around when the consent decree started, 1 out of every 5 incidents, the Department of Justice determined unreasonable force was used. That's 20%. Right now it's less than 1%. So we are modeling what we have to do. And in terms of crowd control, which has always been a contentious issue, we passed a proposal that gives our officers the flexibility to manage what could sometimes be a dangerous crowd, that passed the muster of Judge Robar, who was probably the toughest judge in terms of police accountability. So moving forward, working with our officers, working with the Guild, working with management, we'll keep evolving into a system that holds the officers accountable, but allows them to do their job and makes the community feel as though they're accountable. This is why I was the first proponent of body cameras, by the way. I said, we could catch our officers doing things right, being professional. We could catch them doing things where they need to improve. You may recall I came out with body cameras before anyone even thought it was popular. So accountability is a big thing for me, but I also need the officers to be able to do their job and learn from their own mistakes. And so I think we have a good system in place, and I look forward to the future.
Now, I have to admit, I tried to look for these numbers. I could not find current numbers, but I do remember back when Kathleen O'Toole was the chief of police, that they talked about one of the big challenges being that something like 80% of officers for SPD were from outside of Seattle, lived outside of Seattle. Again, not knowing what the numbers are, but I doubt that went down to 10% or anything. Do you see that as a problem? And if so, how do you address that?
Sure. Well, number one, Seattle is hard for anyone to live in these days. We have an unaffordable city, and the average house now is around 10 times the income. Our income has not kept up with the pace of a house. So officers are not exempt from that. We love when officers come from our high schools in Seattle. They know our community, but at some point, I want a good officer, period. And where they choose to live is up to them. They may have a spouse that lives outside of the city. So I'm not hung up whether they live in the city or not. It'd be ideal to have them there, but the fact is that the housing is somewhat prohibitive for some people in certain demographics, and we have to acknowledge that. But the point really is they have to know our community. They have to get out of the car. They have to be able to interface with people at coffee shops, and the only way we can do that to still meet our 7-minute response times is to have more officers. You can't defund them. And again, I have an opponent that will not commit to any number, and I'm very specific when I talk about 1,500, because I look at best practices throughout the city. I talk to mayors and chiefs of police all the time. I just met with the chief of police of Portland just a couple of months ago. So this isn't guesswork on what works. But to your point, yes, it'd be ideal to have these officers live in the city. That would be a great outcome.
We'll get to affordability in a little bit, but now I want to turn us to the homelessness crisis. The latest point-in-time count shows King County has seen a 26% increase in homelessness from 2022 to 2024. Is it time to abandon the King County Regional Homelessness Authority? And if so, what comes next?
Yeah. No, it's not time to abandon it. And housing is the solution to homelessness. We can solve homelessness. Number one, we have to own that. My approach is radically different from my opponents. That the way to end homelessness is to get permanent supportive housing, the person into permanent supportive housing. They need wraparound services. Just sticking them in a tent or a tiny home is not the answer. That's like putting someone in an emergency room and not the hospital. If you look at the county, first of all, let's recognize this is a national problem. Homelessness in our country went up 18%, close to 800 million. I'm sorry, I don't want to misstate that. Oh, she's giving me time. Let me just stop by saying this. The answer will be getting regional support, resources, land, regional support, and that's what I'm doing right now. To sit back and say Seattle's needs to solve it on its own, that is not the answer. 85% of the tiny homes in the county are in Seattle. 63% of the shelter in the county are in Seattle. And 70% of the people that are unhoused or treated in Seattle did not become unhoused in the city. So we're actually doing a stellar job of trying to treat people that are coming here, but we need that regional support.
Your opponent also criticizes what you've done with camp sweeps. She says you've spent a lot of money, a lot of time on just sweeping people from one location to the next. What is your response to that?
Sure. Well, I have removed encampments north of 80%. About 80% of the encampments have moved. I do not want to see syringes or dangerous conditions around the city. 62% of the shots fired now have been reduced. Around 47% of the fires that are started in these encampments have been reduced, but we offer shelter. We have to get people housed. So she is absolutely wrong that moving from A to B is approach. I was one of the supporters of the Housing First approach when I was on the council. And again, I've been working on housing issues for 30 years. I'm a very compassionate person when it comes to anyone being unhoused. So we do the outreach, we try to work with folks, but we also have to calibrate that. She will not talk about whether she will remove a person if they refuse. And often people are obstructing pathways where someone, perhaps they're blind and can't get through. So this is what an executive has to do. An executive has to make tough decisions. So what we're doing is a best practice. Get people in permanent supportive housing, getting them the treatment that they need. And that's why, again, why I need the resources of a region.
But I'm sorry, to carry out kind of the allegory that you set out there, when you have an emergency situation, you put people through triage first, then they go to the ER, and then they go to the hospital. We're in an emergency situation with homelessness. So just concentrating on the hospital part of it or permanent housing part of it seems like it's ignoring maybe the initial stages.
As I said, 80% of the encampments have been removed, if you look at the numbers. The fact is, as I said earlier, in the country, 18% of people are unhoused. We have a serious crisis in this country, in this county, in this state. Homelessness in the state has gone up. So what we need to do, this problem just didn't start the last year or two, right? It's a systemic issue. So what we need—
But it's increased over the past 2 years.
It's increased in the entire country. And so, again, if Seattle, and if I say this, 70% of the people we are treating in Seattle are coming unhoused outside of the city. So we're putting a lot of resources into that movement, but they keep coming here because we are doing what we need to do. 2,204 people accepted shelter in 2023, okay? And if you look at people that accept shelter, they're going into permanent housing, 50% increase since I've taken office. So we're getting more people in supportive housing, way higher than the national trend. I'll be the first to say there's a lot of work to do, right? I mean, I'm not telling you that there's not a lot of work to do. I've been mayor for 3.5 years. This problem has been in the making for 15, 20 years, right? And I'm fighting tariffs. I'm fighting the cost of construction. We've put $1 billion in housing since I've been in office. My budget, $350 million in housing. Unprecedented numbers when I face a $600 million deficit every single year. So we're doing everything right. The problem is very big, but her solution just to stick someone in a tent or a tiny home. We have 19 tiny home villages. We have 3 sanctioned encampments, right? So, I mean, I know the numbers. Why? Because every single day I'm trying to house people. I know what we're trying to do. That's why we passed the biggest housing levy. We're going to keep 9,000 people in their homes from the housing levy to prevent homelessness. So you have to also take in the fact that we're preventing homelessness while we're trying to shelter the people that are unsheltered.
Can I follow up on this real quick? How do you solve homelessness amongst the percentage of people that refuse services? Your opponent would say that they're not being offered the right services under your administration, and they just are moved from place to place, and the people in those neighborhoods say, I'm going to see that person back here eventually, and they're just not being offered the right services. So for the people who are reluctant to accept, what's your answer for that?
So where my opponent and I would agree is that I believe most people can be redeemed and can be optimized, could be treated, and live a productive life. I believe that. But there are some that will fall through the cracks, and perhaps they will refuse service. And in those situations, if they are a threat to other people, if they're a threat, if they're using drugs or there's mental illness, then we have to take other measures. And I don't want to, it's very specific to that individual. So I don't want to give a general statement like this person's going to get arrested or we're going to mandatorily put them in a jail or something like that. It's very individualized. And so what we do is we hire the smartest PhDs and the masters of social work to guide us in how we treat that person. And that's exactly what we do. So we don't just hire people that are tough on crime. When I walk these streets, I mean, I was born in the city. When I walk these streets, these are not strangers to me. These are people that I grew up with, people that I went to high school with. So we try to always lead with empathy, but I'm not afraid to arrest people that are harming others. And I don't mince words there. My charter responsibility to make sure that my kids are safe, your kids are safe, families are safe, elders are safe, kids are safe. Now you won't hear her say something like, I will arrest people. And you won't see her commit to a number of police officers that she's trying to achieve. But I'm very direct. I will say 1,500 officers, and we will arrest people when they are creating crimes, they are committing crimes, and they are harming other people.
Moving on to affordability. Smart Asset recently released a study, Mayor, of how much money you need to live a comfortable life here in Seattle. For a single adult, that number is $128,000 per year. For a family, it goes up to $330,000. Staggering. Census data shows the median household income in the city is lower than both of those numbers. It's at $120,000, substantially lower than the numbers I just mentioned. So what are your policy priorities to make Seattle a more affordable place to be?
Yeah. So there's two things that's occurring here. Number one is income needs to go up, right? So we need to make sure that, the fact is we're a wealthy city, and even these port and maritime and industry jobs who are looking for employees, they pay well. The high tech, the biotech, the software developers, those pay well. So if you look at what we put on the ballot in terms of having the best Seattle public school system we can possibly have, from pre-K to child care, all the way up to 2 years free college if you graduate, that is a design, and I could go into depth on that, that is a design to make sure that we are optimizing the future of our kids, number one. Number two, everything the city can control to drive down the price of a house, for example, we will do. That's why we started our permit and customer trust initiative to drive down the cost of construction. You look at these projects around the city that we're doing right now, the Horcher project at the University Village, we cut down 2 years on the permit time. So we'll do everything we can to drive down the costs in the city, create the inventory for housing. That's why our comp plan produces 333,000 units. It's an aggressive comp plan, and make sure that our kids can optimize these opportunities that the city of Seattle presents. The fact is we are a wealthy city, and it's bittersweet in terms of the effect, unless we're intentional in what we're doing, as I tried to describe our plan.
330,000 units is a very ambitious plan. There's been an estimate that it's $500,000 per unit given the cost of construction right now. And so where would be the space? Are you just talking about vertically around, I've heard around transit? Where do all those units
So once again,
go?
We took a very thoughtful approach because we also want to have a certain quality of life in Seattle. And that's exactly why we changed the tree ordinance to make sure we're protecting tree canopy before we developed in depth our housing plan. So to answer your question, in the 84 square miles, we created what are called neighborhood centers where we think growth should take place. I'll give you a good example is on Aurora. We have a project on Aurora called the Aurora Light. So we took transit-oriented development. We took arterials. We looked at the 84 square miles and examined where we thought growth should occur, and that's what we did. And it's spread out throughout the city. And there's been pushback in a lot of areas, of course, and that's the malleable process that we do, listening to communities. Some people have pointed out there's been environmental critical areas. There's been slopes that they're concerned about. So that's the process we're going through. But we produce, again, a very thoughtful plan on where growth should occur.
Because you are trying to attack affordability, why is it that you're considering upping the sales tax, which is one of the most regressive taxes out there.
Yeah, well, number one, that's a modest tax, and it goes for public safety, number one. Number two is one of the few tools that the state gives us. Again, my opponent will keep talking about progressive tax, progressive tax, progressive tax. We only have a handful of tools. The B&O tax is one, the sales tax is another. And again, the fact is that in order to have the infrastructure here for people to live in, we have to reinvest in the city. We think, again, that under my administration, we know how to spend money efficiently, effectively. I cite a lot of numbers because being a former technology lawyer, I know how to look at numbers and use matrix in it. They say I'm the dashboard mayor because I like seeing the return on investment. So we will continue to do that, but the sales tax is one of the few tools that we have. And again, we won't overuse it, but it was a good means that the state gave us, particularly for public safety.
Let's talk about the criticism you've been facing. Your opponent, Katie Wilson, says you've put the interest of large businesses ahead of struggling families, and they're being left behind in the last 3.5 years of your administration. What would be your response to that criticism?
Well, number one is you have to look at life experiences, number one. So as an attorney, I held a lot of large businesses accountable. I've led class action lawsuits against large corporations for gender discrimination, race discrimination. I value our large businesses. They bring jobs here. They pay B&O taxes, so I don't denigrate them as well. Our B&O tax policy was probably the most progressive tax that this city has ever done, and where we're, again, taxing the largest corporations and making sure 90% of the businesses have a break. That's good tax policy, and I don't think any other mayor would have touched that, to my knowledge. I'd also say, you look at my legislation like Ban the Box, where I prohibited corporations from asking about the criminal background of an employee. That was largely opposed by a lot of employers. So that rhetoric she's spewing is just baseless, and I go back to life experiences and our actual policies. She can't point to one policy that does that. They just say these generalities, but there's not one policy that does that.
Mayor, you've been a public servant for a long time now. You're a pretty well-known entity in this city. So what do you make of almost 60% of the people in the primary voting against you?
Well, it's a tough job. With Trump in office, I understand the angst and the anger. I have been in a position of power, and people, they could see me as a target. I lead with a spirit of humility. That experience here, particularly now in 2025, 2026, is not a liability, it's essential, it's a necessity. I'm well versed in the 10th Amendment, the federal overreach clause in our Constitution. I've appeared in front of federal court. So right now, you don't need an unproven person trying to run an $8 billion city. The fact of the matter is being an incumbent right now with Trump in office is a tough job. But I sign up for that. People ask me to rebuild the public safety system. I've done that. They have asked me to remove some of the encampments and get people housed. We've done that. They asked me to invest in affordable housing. I've done that. So I'm a proven commodity, and I think a lot of people didn't pay attention during the primary. Everyone thought I was a shoo-in. Let's just be honest. Labor supports me, business supports me, neighborhoods support me. But there's a lot of angst out there, and I have to recognize that. And in the general, we're having conversations all around the city about what we can do, and that's what we're going to do.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the Trump comparison. Are you saying that people are anti-authority right now, and so they're taking their anti-Trump feelings and pointing them at you?
No, let me be very clear on that. Thanks for the clarification. People are very angry right now, period. They look at the price of a house. They look at people being unhoused. They look at Trump's cruelty, where he's cutting funding to cancer research, to public safety, to transportation projects. He's using diversity, equity, and inclusion as treating them as though they're bad things. People are anxious right now, and I have been in a position of power. I have to own that. And what I'm suggesting to folks is that you have to look at what I've actually done, a lifetime of service. So, had Harris won, I think there'd be a different conversation in the city right now. But it is the hand that we're dealt. And again, I say that in this situation, this is where experience matters. And quite honestly, if I'm going to be candid with everyone, as I only know how to be, people weren't paying a lot of attention to the primary in terms of who was running. I mean, I was running the city, and I think I did 3 debates, and people don't know who Katie Wilson is. And they're finding more and more about her positions, that she's changing now. And then they will say, well, this person, if you look at the data, crime rates going down, shots fired going down, homicides going down, education going up. They'll say, well, and look at the hand I was dealt 3-4 years ago. It was a tough city to manage. You remember the conditions. So we think that once voters in the general look at that, of course, we will win re-election.
But there's a trend here, Mayor, where the voters in this primary were making a statement, and I doubt anybody would argue that the Trump effect, they would check, Trump and you in the same voter box. So with that aside, with the people that voted for Katie Wilson, what do you think, as you carry this around with you, what do you think that they were trying to say about you?
Well, what I think they're trying to say about me is I have been in a position of authority, and they want more. They want to see more of what, here's, I think.
The people who voted for Katie Wilson, what were they trying to say about you?
Well, perhaps they were saying that they want the city to be more affordable. They want to see people housed, and they want to make sure that they have someone in office that can be a change agent. That's what they say. When an incumbent is in office, they're saying they want a change agent. Now, I am the change agent. I've only been mayor for 3.5 years, right? So if you look at the change we've done, when I say that an unprecedented housing levy at $970 million, an unprecedented transportation levy at $1.55 billion, now recruiting officers at the clip we're doing, we're succeeding numbers that's ever been in the city's history before in terms of how we're recruiting. We are the change agent. So if they want change, then I would be the one that they would vote for.
Do you want to go to number 8? Yep.
Yeah, or number 7. You had touched on Trump and the Trump effect. His administration has threatened action against sanctuary cities, including Seattle. Donald Trump Jr. just recently called Portland and Seattle both crap hole cities and suggested that the National Guard may roll in eventually. At the same time, Seattle gets federal funding for everything from supportive housing to addiction services to plans to add more trees through the city, as you alluded to before. So what is your approach for working with the current federal government?
So this is probably one of the largest distinctions between my opponent and I. This is where experience matters. So I've authorized 3 lawsuits already. So number 1, we will fight him in court. Number 2, we'll work with community-based organizations to make sure that anyone affected by his executive order, such as the immigrant and refugee communities, that we're well positioned to assist them. That's why I put money in there for legal services as an example. My life story, my mother was interned in a concentration camp because of an executive order 9066. So when I see this kind of behavior coming out of the presidents, it's very personal for me, and that's why I went to law school, to be able to articulate the stance we have to take. So I am concerned about federal funds. We monitor it literally every week to see where we are exposed. That's another reason why we imposed the B&O tax policy to sort of Trump-proof our city, and we'll keep doing that work, and certainly I'm much, much better positioned to do this than my opponent. So
you think that the B&O tax will be your safety net should Trump be vindictive with funding?
One of many, and again, the court system will also be our safety net, and thus far we've been successful.
Move on to number 8. The World Cup. Mayor Harrell, I don't have to tell you, you're already preparing for this. It's going to make Seattle a focal point for the entire world next summer. The financial windfall is expected to be in the neighborhood of $1 billion. This is a big deal. This is the Super Bowl of a magnitude beyond anything the city has ever seen. Imagine the World Cup Seattle, it's here. Right now we're into June and July of next year. How would the World Cup Seattle look different under your leadership than under your opponents?
Well, under our leadership, we're already planning. I'm one of several cities, 12 or 13 cities in the country as a whole city, meeting with the mayors, making sure we are safe. I met with the mayor of Vancouver to make sure when we have cross-border travel that is safe. We've met with our local organizing committee to make sure that all the logistics and wayfinding, people speaking different languages, that they will feel comfortable here. So we are preparing for it. Not a week goes by where we're not in planning mode. So we feel pretty positioned. Under her possible administration, let's just be candid. She has no public safety background at all. None. No transportation background in terms of strategic planning, looking at what needs to be done, period. She has no national connections by which we can get this work done. So this is why you need stable leadership in place. This is not a position for the faint at heart. You have to be decisive, and I'm sure, because I've listened to her interview before, she doesn't commit to anything. She won't talk about numbers. She won't talk about anything specific in her housing plan. It's just lofty ideas. We have put concrete plans in place on how to prepare for FIFA games, and that's what we're going to do.
So you think public safety would be at risk? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, let me be very direct. Yes, it would be, because again, you're talking about a person just a couple of years ago said, let's imagine a city without a Seattle Police Department. Let's defund this police department by 50%. And then just last night she said, well, what does staffing look like for you? She says we have to have adequate staffing. And I guess I have to ask what that means, because I'm still living in Seattle. What does adequate staffing mean? That is a non-statement. What we call those non-statements. I'm talking about 1,500 officers, because that's what we need. So yes, it would be totally unsafe in my estimation, just based on her inexperience.
Does that mean you would not go to a World Cup game in Seattle if she were the mayor?
That's a silly question. I won't answer that one.
It's not a silly question.
What is,
I'm asking you if you
I
have
don't
real concerns about where her leadership would take the city and be on the stage for a big event where safety, transportation, all of that is called into the scenario. Would you go?
I don't know, Monique. I mean, I don't know. I'll let the patrons make that decision.
Good.
Okay, yeah. There's some things about you you'd like people to know. What's something that people ought to know about Bruce Harrell as a person? They know about your background. They know you've been mayor for 3.5 years and not a politician outside of your office.
I would probably say they don't really know how hard my journey has been, because I'm in a powerful position. You know, I wear these suits on occasion. But I was the little biracial boy from a black father and a Japanese mother that people teased a lot. I was excluded from a lot of groups. I had to work harder than everyone. You know, I graduated valedictorian in my class not because I was the smartest, because I worked the hardest. I was an MVP in many sports, not because I was the biggest or the fastest, but I worked the hardest. I became a chief counsel of a major corporation because I worked harder than everyone in the field of technology and telecommunications. I worked for not a lot of money for the city council for 12 years because I love this city that much. I love this city this much. I believe in the people. I believe in public safety. I believe in education. I believe in hard work. As mayor, I've worked 7 days a week, most weeks, as my wife would attest. And what they know is this job is a tough job. These issues of homelessness, if it could be fixed like this, it would have been fixed like this. This is an issue that the country struggles with. And I need more time to do what we need to do. I need a fully staffed police department. I need stability and leadership. And that's what we do. I set the investment strategy through the housing levy, through the families and education levy that's on the books now, and through the transportation levy and the B&O tax. I've set the investment strategy to make this city phenomenal. I just need more time, and that's what I want them to know.
Can I just press a little bit on that? Tell us about you, Bruce. We know you, many people know your biography. What's something about you as a person, not as a politician, that they might go, oh?
Yeah. Probably that I wake up every morning with the love of my life. I have 2 beautiful grandchildren, Kaya and Emmy. I have 2 beautiful daughters-in-law who I love, 2 sons, and my favorite sibling is my daughter. But don't tell my sons I said that.
That'll be news to him, huh?
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is there anything else that we didn't ask?
No, I think we're good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.